And then you start making money, real money off a cell tower lease. Get that structure right. You will benefit on day one, but you'll benefit on day two, day 2002, etc. You go from leases that are worth a couple $1,000s a month to $6,000, $7,000, $8,000, $10,000 a month.
Man,
Then you're living the dream with a cell tower. And it is just money coming in, boom, boom, boom.
welcome everybody to the Self-Storage Income Podcast. We've got an incredible episode for you guys today. Somebody that has been on the podcast before, but is an amazing guest to have on here to reiterate some of these different topics in regards to the one and only cell tower situation that so many property owners experience in self-storage. Whether you're looking to buy a facility with an existing cell tower on it, or you've got cell tower companies coming to you wanting to develop and build cell towers, there is a lot of ins and outs to be focused on and to be concerned about. And you want to go into that really knowing and understanding what you should and shouldn't do, how these cell towers operate, how they integrate with property owners, and how that's going to affect you as a self-storage owner and what that looks like. So with that, our guest today is Hugh Odom. Hugh, welcome back, man. It's good to have you.
Well, thank you. Always a pleasure to be here and try to spread the word about cell towers around the country.
Yes, no, I love it, man. I love it. And we've got George hanging out with us today. George, how the heck you doing, man?
Doing good. Filling in for AJ. Excited to be on here. So we get a lot of people asking us questions about cell towers. So I'm excited to be on this as well too. It's a overwhelming topic, I feel like. So Hugh, really glad that you're here to enlighten us on this topic.
Yeah, that's going to be great. So I guess a couple things. Let's actually introduce both of you, because I know, George, a lot of people within self-storage income, they know who you are, but just give everybody just a quick rundown of who you are real quick.
Yeah, for sure. So my name's George. I help run self-storage income. I'm a co-owner of SSI. I helped create it, launch it. And I have a tech background, so my focus has been to really help take all of AJ's knowledge in the storage industry and put it into a compact way for people to digest and put it to use. So doing stuff like this for the podcast is fun for me as well too, because I can see how it has an impact on people all the way down the road towards when they're buying their storage deals.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Yeah, thanks for sharing. And it's been great having you, dude. You've been building something awesome. It's so cool to see everybody's progress, going from not having a property to having a property and being able to support their families and exit W-2 jobs that they didn't want anymore, and just being able to progress their lives in ways that they wouldn't have been able to without having self-storage income as that guide and resource. So it's really cool, man. Appreciate everything you do. And then Hugh, let's give everybody just a snapshot, who you are, what your background is, for those that don't know.
Well, I'm the president and one of the founders of Vertical Consultants, and my background, I've been a real estate and telecom attorney for over 25 years. I was an attorney inside AT&T for almost 10 years, and I've been a founder of this company, which we're celebrating our 15th anniversary this summer. And we work with property owners all across the United States, including self-storage facility owners throughout the United States, from one side of the country to the other, to try to make sure that they get a good cell tower lease, either when they're approached for a new one, or they get a good existing one through renegotiations of those agreements to make sure they get the most out of those agreements today and going forward, but also protect their property and their facility, because that's one of the most misunderstood things about a cell tower agreement. It can be a great asset, or it can be an anchor that pulls you down and gets you in some real bad situations.
Talking rent and compensation, can you give people out there that really don't understand, how do cell towers pay people? Is it a lump sum? Is it a month-to-month thing? How does that work generally from what you've seen?
Well, the traditional way is through a monthly lease payment. But a lot of times, I'll get to this in just a second, a lot of times right now what we'll see is this kind of this little bait they throw out, saying, I'll pay you a one-time fee, a one-time lump sum payment. And that's really kind of, I'll say that's the bait you don't want to take. I promise you that in the short term, it may feel really good, like eating a piece of candy. Woo, I got that big check in the mail, and you just giving away the farm. With regards to rent structure, we try to get people to think of this in a different way, I should say. Our philosophy is there's no such thing as market rent. What people do is they say, what's the guy down the road getting? What's, what's people in my area? And the way I try to get people to look at it is look at your individual situation. The reason we do that is because, like I said, I was inside AT&T and I've had guys inside other companies that work with me, Verizon, T-Mobile, et cetera. And AT&T, for example, does not look at a zip code and say, all our cell sites in this area, this zip coders have the same value because they're in a certain location. They look at them individually. And then you have to do that. You have to look at comparable situations. It's not location, it's situation, okay? And that's why I'm sure we'll get to it. We started up Cell Tower AI. So what we do, and what we did this years ago, we look at similar situations, but it wouldn't be as easy because we didn't have AI to go through tens of thousands of leases that we had on file. Just
Right.
look at, say, hey, this site has this, and this, all these data points. So you look at comparable situations. So actually you're using the cell tower company's own information against them. You're looking and say, hey, this lines up with this with regards to the similar type of cell tower, similar equipment, term on the lease, terms in general, and that's how you determine the value on day one. But that's only getting it right on day one. Where people miss the boat, miss the ocean, is they look at rent. I look again at that word structure. I want to get you right on day one, but I want you to be pulled up throughout the term for that rent based upon how much value they're getting from your property. Just think of it. What people sometimes look at and say, my rent is X, whatever that number, 1,000, 2,000, 4,000, whatever is, my escalator is 3%, let's say. My term is 50 years. Boom, you've fallen for the trap of the cell tower company. They have got you to agree to a scheduled rent, a structured rent over that period of time, a fixed dollar amount they're going to have to pay you, and they keep on getting more value, and they fix that cost. I want you to get the rent right day one and then get pulled up through many ways that you can get pulled up over a cell tower lease as they get pulled up. And then you start making money, real money off a cell tower lease. Get that structure right. You will benefit on day one, but you'll benefit on day two, day 2002, etc. And that really gets people. You go from leases that are worth a couple $1,000s a month to $6,000, $7,000, $8,000, $10,000 a month.
Man.
Not because they got the rent right on day one. It's because they structured it right. And there's so many different ways you can do that. And the cell tower companies hate it, but if you know how to do it, it can be done. And here's the last thing I'll mention. It's the reason you can do it if you understand not what the cell tower is offering you. Don't worry about the rent. Don't worry about the other terms. Understand what you are offering them. And that gets you the best terms today and going forward.
Yeah.
It's also just totally passive relative to the work to make your storage revenue. So if you can get all the work's done in the structuring of the deal, right? After that, it's just collect your paychecks.
Yeah, the greatest of all worlds is one, get the rent structure right. Two, get everything passed through, every expense known regarding that cell tower passed through. So you have true passive revenue going forward. And three, make sure that your lease does not have a negative impact on the rest of your property. Have flexibility. Then you're living the dream with a cell tower.
Right.
And it is just money coming in, boom, boom, boom. It's just simple. All you want to do is put a mirror up against how a cell tower company does its agreements and just do it the same for you. I try to get people to understand this. It's not, they're trying to get you to do it a certain way because it's beneficial to them. I'm trying to get you to do the same way they're doing it internally, and that benefits you.
What are some of the most common pitfalls that you're finding? I know structure is one of your things, right? So let's dive into what that means and what some of the most common pitfalls are, some of the highest level things that people need to be considering that maybe they haven't thought of when it comes to cell towers.
Well, one of the big philosophies, and that's the word that we try to emphasize, is let's move away from the rent for a second and talk about structure. And I tell people, I want to get you to think bigger, and then I want you to think even bigger than that. And how that really comes into play with self-storage and any kind of property, but more particularly self-storage, is sometimes property owners kind of get lulled into this kind of false sense of security with regard to, hey, this cell tower is on the back portion of my property. It's in this little small area. Somebody's sending me a check every month. Good to go. I'm no problems there. What people don't understand is that cell tower agreement impacts all of your property. And what I mean by that, restrictions in that agreement, unless you structure it correctly, can limit your future development of your property. That means that you basically have to go to the cell tower company and say, can I please do this? Would you allow me to do this? And there's two issues with that. First of all, they're not going to be very responsive. And when you get a response, you're most likely not going to like it. And the second thing would be with regards to sale of the property, disposition. You get into a situation by which you want to sell your facility, and somebody comes to you and says, hey, I really like your facility, but can I do this, or can I do this, or can I redevelop it? Can I move just not the cell tower, but maybe the utilities serving the cell tower? Because I have a different plan for your property. And again, 95+% of all cell tower leases don't have that flexibility to be able to go to that cell tower company and say, hey, I got a buyer here and they're ready to go and they're going to offer me an amount of money I couldn't believe somebody's giving me for this property, but I need you just to reroute your utilities. Cell tower company goes, again, we don't have to do it. Tough luck, move on. And you're getting a small amount of money compared to your overall property. The third thing is financing. We're seeing this more and more that banks are very leery of cell tower leases, especially bad ones, because the banks look at it kind of like I just mentioned. They say, hey, if we ever have to take over this property, then we're left with this agreement that we have to work around. That's going to make it difficult for us to find a buyer to take this off our books because we had to retain it. Also, they may take some additional risk into the decision making of giving you a loan because of that cell tower and the liabilities associated with it. So it's very important that a property owner understands that you can get a good cell tower agreement that gives you that ancillary revenue. But what you do not want to do is get into a situation by which your use of your property for development, disposition, financing is subordinate, is secondary to their use of a small portion of your property. You're revolving around them. They should be revolving around you.
Hugh, I think that lending part is super important, because something we always like emphasize with people is like, hey, we're not just trying to buy self-storage. We're trying to, this is an investment. We're trying to build wealth and grow income. And then, so it's always trying to teach people like what's your exit strategy. And even if like what you're saying is like, even if I'm selling a facility to you and you can be okay with the cell tower agreement, the bank might not be. And so that can create a huge issue of like, like not structuring those leases properly. If now a bank, because the bank, the one thing they don't want to do is run self-storage. That's why they lend to other people's stuff, but you don't have to do it. But then if the bank's like, hey, we don't want to deal with that lease, like that can create huge issues for people trying to sell those down the road.
Yeah, one of the biggest things that we tell property owners, and one of the commonalities in real estate is location, location, location. Well, the second thing I believe is flexibility, flexibility, flexibility.
Yes.
The more flexible your property is, the more options you have, the more valuable it becomes. When you start limiting those options, it not only hinders what you want to do, it hinders what somebody else wants to do. And then again, the bank may look at me if I want to get a loan and say, hey, I don't really like this, and I'm going to charge you a higher interest rate, or I'm going to do this, or put this restriction on my loan. And that hinders who you can get to sell your property to down the road, your facility. So it really, again, I go back into this kind of this situation by which the property owner says, oh, it's just out there in the corner and no big deal and everything. And it really is. Cell tower companies, they're not bad guys. They have a job to do. And they're not going to tell you about all the pitfalls and all the trap doors. And where property owners need to understand is that those things exist. I'm not making them up. We see them happen every day. We've been in business, like I said, 15 years. We've been contacted by tens of thousands of people with cell towers on their property. Not one in 15 years has ever contacted us and said, I want to tell you what a great cell tower lease I have. They contact us most of the time and say, I didn't realize that the cell tower company could do fill in the blank. Or I didn't realize I can't do this for my property now. You know why? Because they got so focused on the rent, which I'm sure we'll get to, but they got so focused on the rent, they forgot to figure out what they're agreeing to. And I always ask people, do you know what you're agreeing to? And they say, well, how much rent should I be getting? And I go, figure out what you're agreeing to first, and then figure out what you need to get, because that comes to get you. And the longer these leases are, the more likelihood something's going to pop up. It's going to hit you out of the side of the, upside of the head, and you're stuck, because you're going against some of the biggest companies in the world. They're not going to sit there and go, oh, sure, we'll deal with you, we'll help you out. No, you're a number. You look at that cell tower lease, you see an identification number. That is who you are. That is how they treat you after you sign the lease.
Yeah, that's such a valuable point. Not only recognizing the position that you're truly in that scenario, because there's no winners in those scenarios. So it's really, really good to understand that shift from, okay, like what am I getting paid? Like you said, shifting from just that rent focus and that income focus to what are the terms? And am I okay with X amount of rent for X type of terms. It's super, super important to really recognize and understand, and have an expert like somebody on your team, like walk someone through that scenario of what it is that you're actually agreeing to, what you can and can't do. Because I mean, like we see so often, we've got people that acquire facilities and say it has a cell tower on it, and they've got this big master plan to go in and do this value add expansion and add storage and do this and do that. Man, if they find out a year later that they can't do that, like they've been working their tail off, trying to build the cash flow, drive revenue, drive rates, manage the facility well, do all this value add to get it to a point where they can finally expand, only to find out like, hey, actually, you can't do it.
Yeah, change your whole game plan.
It totally just destroys that business plan. It would be detrimental for the owner, operator, the investors, if you had them, the bank, if you had them, all of that would be a big deal.
We're in Mississippi right now, and we're turning this storage facility around. Now, lots of people are out trying to buy facilities, small ones that range everywhere from $300,000 to $4 or $5 million. Now, they're worried about getting the money or having the financing. This is why we team up with Live Oak Bank, because they get this. They understand storage. In fact, we have them help us underwrite deals for our students and others, because they are one of the best people in the industry when it comes to getting loans, especially small business loans. They can actually help the customers when they find the asset, understanding how much debt can I get? What's it gonna look like? Not just because of the customer they're working with, but because of their knowledge base. That changes them from being a bank to being a real asset to the customer. We recommend Live Oak Bank to our students as well as others that are trying to get into the storage business. They have an in-depth knowledge of this asset class, so it's more than a bank. It's more than simply getting money. They're actually an asset and a partner to them, helping them go through all the things that they don't know and understand.
Hugh, you mentioned AI. So I was just going through the archives getting ready for this. And Connor, I imagine we've probably done like close to 300 episodes at this point for a self-storage.
Yeah.
It's been a lot. I was looking back, Hugh, you were first time you were on was episode 34 back in 2020. So like you're one of the OGs, one of the first people on here. So like that's awesome. And I know you've been on at least one other time since, on episode 233. My question for you as we're talking about artificial intelligence is like, okay, if that was 5 years ago when you first joined the podcast, what are some things that have changed in the cell tower industry? And then what are some of the fundamentals that will never change as well too, so people can kind of get an understanding of this?
So I think the biggest thing that I've seen change is with regards to existing cell tower sites, the value has only increased. What you have to look at is that over the last 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, there has never been 1 year where there has been less cell towers out there than the year before. Every year there's more. Every year they're adding. Every year, more and more. The reason being is because we're more dependent upon our cell phones, we use more data, etc. So that necessity only has grown. And I guess the big thing that has changed is with regards to the ability to use additional spaces, rooftop spaces, other spaces on property. It's becoming more necessary. And for self-storage, one of the things I've talked about on previous episodes is that self-storage facilities have a higher capacity to have a cell tower on it. The reason being is most self-storage facilities are near commercial and residential. And those are kind of what we call an oasis site. They're right in the middle of both. And they're kind of serve two purposes. And they really have a high value. And that's, again, what you need to know. But the big thing that's changed is that if you asked me 10 years ago or 5 years ago or 2 years ago, where were we going? I remember I was at a self-storage conference. Oh, geez, it was 15 years ago. It was right when we started the company. And a gentleman walked up and he said, "What do you guys do?" And I said, "We deal with cell towers." And he said, "Are they still building those things?" And here we are 15 years later, and there's more and there's more and there's more. The one thing that stays constant, and it's great, it's wonderful for us. It's the best thing in the world for us. The playbook of the cell tower companies is exactly the same as it was 15 years ago. They come out, they pitch the same thing. Reason being is they're successful for most people. And, it's like, for example, if we were playing football and I see you line up in the same formation and run the same play over and over, I know where you're going. I mean, you may change players up a little bit and you may tweak it a little bit, but I know where you're going. And this is what when we talk to a property owner, if they've been presented a new cell tower lease or they have an existing one, we not only go and say, here's your issues and here's what we need to do and here's how we can do it. We're going to tell them how the other side's going to react, what they're going to say. I mean, I can't say I can know everything, but I got about 95%. I know what they're going to respond because they don't change. The great thing about the cell tower companies that they have to advantage is they're huge. They have a lot of resources, a lot of power, a lot of money. They're like a big elephant. They can knock down a wall. They're not very agile. They can't change. They can't move very quick. And that's what we bring to the table. We can move. We can get them unsettled. And when they start hearing the things they're not used to hearing, it puts them off guard. And that's really where we take advantage of them for our clients.
Meanwhile, you're like, I've heard this same thing 5 million times. I know exactly what you're going to say next.
Well, I think, and I'm going to call the Guinness Book of World Records, I think I've seen probably more cell tower leases than any person walking on the planet. So I think, and I've heard the same thing over and over, probably as many times as well. So yeah.
That's too funny. Yeah. Going back on the structure and the rent, you talked about being able to structure things in a way, whereas the cell tower company, as they begin to grow and expand, as far as increasing value, that is, that you can also capitalize on that increase. So are you talking about, like, how would a structure like that look? Would it be a percentage? Is it like a revenue share that, as they add carriers to a tower, or that, the value that they create through the tower increases over time and you get a percentage of that? Or how does that escalation typically look in a structure like that?
So I classify it in two different ways, and I'll try to be quick on this. Is that I structure, you do A, I get B, and then the things that are hidden. Okay. So what I mean for the first one is that, for example, your situation, if you had a subtenant out there, I get a percentage of the subtenant revenue. Okay. That's an A, I get B, right? Pretty simple kind of thing. And that's what we can do to, if you do A, I get B. Where the underlying and where the secret sauce is, which is, I can tell you because I always tell people, I can give you the recipe, I just cook a better meal, is that the hidden things are, first of all, you take things off the table on day one, right? What a cell tower company comes out and say, I want 10,000 square feet of your property. They don't need it. They're trying to get more than they need because they don't have to come back to you. You reduce that. You negotiate that space down. That's a commodity. You want to give them as little amount of space because now they have to come back to you, right? It's not A to B, but it's come back. I want not to enter into a 50, 60-year lease. I want to give them less amount of time. Why? Because they're going to run out of time sooner. I don't mean 25 years. If you get a 25-year term, they're going to have to come back with 15 or 10 years left because they have that necessity to elongate that lease. If they don't wait to the very end, that's a misperception that they wait to the last year. And the third thing is you try to limit their use, what they can do inside that space. A cell tower company will come out and say, we get to do whatever we want inside that space. We can change as many times. We can do as much. I don't want that. I want them to have come back to me and get my review, get my consent. That's where I can negotiate based upon what they're doing. So I want to get A's to B, but I also want to get the situations by which they're having to, in the industry, it's called a touch. I want to get as many touches at that lease over the life as possible. That's why I'm trying to limit what I give them today and going forward.
Technology is the name of the game, and how you operate your facility and the efficiency at which you can operate will depend on the technology you use. Your property management system, what it allows you to do, and what you have access will determine the outcome of how that facility performs. That's why we go with Tenant Inc. with their product Hummingbird, because they are the best in class. When dealing with automation, when dealing with move-ins, customer acquisition process, improving my online acquisition process, they are bar none the best. So if you are looking to automate your facility or operate it in a best in class way, make sure you guys are looking at Tenant Inc. and their product Hummingbird. The link is in the description.
I think too, as everything's changing with cell towers, like you were mentioning AI, like what are some of the key impacts that you're seeing AI have on the cell tower industry? And I imagine speed of looking at the leases, but anything else of how it's disrupting what's going on with the cell tower industry?
Well, we're the first ones, I believe, to build out an AI model with lease data. So we're taking it to the next level. We've invested a lot of time and a lot of money to put in that to be able to do that. So we can go to have a client come in and say, basically, boom, we put this through our process and we can look at all the different aspects of the financial side of it, but also the non-monetary to pull out those red flags. And then again, when a cell tower company comes back to us and said, well, we never agree to this, we don't agree to that provision, we can just pull it out of another lease. And then, I mean, that's as simple as that. And we say, look, what's the difference? And again, they get discombobulated with regards to that. From an AI perspective on the other side, look, I think that the carriers and the tower companies are using AI more particularly on the reverse. What a cell tower company does is they adapt to situations to first determine where their shortfalls are. Because on a long-term lease, if we're talking about the negatives for a property owner, the cell tower company also runs up to situations they don't like, and they're trying to renegotiate. So they're able to pick those out as well. They're also, I hate to say this, but they're also able to determine who is the most susceptible to actually take a rent reduction or renegotiate at time. All these different things are negative because they start looking at property values, start looking at different types of owners, all these different things, because they are narrowing down their attack on property owners, and they're picking out the ones they can get.
So you can actually get a rent reduction on your lease agreements too?
Look, I was on the phone earlier today with a very sophisticated building owner that owns many properties up in Minnesota, and he got contacted their company. I was on the phone with their company, and yeah, I mean, it's a concerted effort that we see these literally every day. Somebody contacts us and say, I got this letter from Verizon, AT&T, whoever. It's usually not from the company directly. It's from a third-party company that kind of masks themselves as those companies. And they're saying, we've done a review of these sites and you need to reduce your rent by this much, or we're going away.
Wow.
They're playing the odds. They know if they throw out enough of these, a certain percentage are going to be susceptible to taking that. And here's the thing, if anybody's listening to this and they've received that letter, the one thing I always say is go back to that company and say, ask one question. What is the benefit for me to reduce my rent? Because when they're asking to reduce their rent, they're just reducing the rent. They're not giving you any kind of certainty with them being out there. They're just saying, if you don't do this, we may leave. Well, what keeps you from leaving the next day? What keeps you from coming back to me in 6 months or 6 years and asking me to reduce again? They're playing the same card over and over. And so it happens all the time. But I think AI, kind of tagging back to AI is going to make this more of a narrow focus. So they'll see where they can get people that are more susceptible to that based upon certain data points, because that's really how they look at things. They start looking at trying to narrow that down. This is just a little bit of a game between the parties of trying to figure out who they can get. And some people may say, well, we're talking about a few $100s worth of rent here or there in some instances. Well, let me put it this way. You're talking about over the life, at least of the value, every $100 equals somewhere between $25,000 to $40,000 of value. Okay. Right. So, and then just think of it this way. That value is increasing by the escalator over time. So if I have, just say it's $35,000, just hypothetically, and I just said, I give you $35,000 right now, and every year it increases by 3%, or I could take it away. You see my point is that's why the cell tower companies and the wireless carriers fight so hard over the rent, fight so hard over escalators, because they understand that nickel that you may think is a nickel on the floor equals $1, equals a $20 bill, equals $100 over time. And that's what the fight is always about.
Yeah, this is something we talk about a lot just in rates, right? We're talking storage facilities and in rates, and how just this incremental revenue management can just have this massive impact on the overall value over time and based on, a cap rate. So huge point. It still applies to cell towers, and you need to be looking at it that way. And two, I really want people to understand this, because even this is something that I get hung up on, is that valuation of the cell tower, like how they're valuing it. Because again, looking at real estate, we're looking at comps, right? But how do you look at comps in cell towers? It's like you said, it's situational, right?
So there's two different ways. There's two different classifications. I'm looking at a new lease. Okay. I'm looking at a situation based upon comparables in the vicinity with regards to properties. Okay. I look at it and I see what the other properties they could use in the area. And then I look at comparables based upon restrictions on where they would need to go, network needs, things like that. I try to figure out what their options are and why they've contacted the property owner they're talking to, right? I try to figure out, again, I go back to that simple statement of what the property owner is offering the cell tower company. So we start to reverse engineer it from that perspective, okay? So what they don't want you to know is, okay, I can go down the road, but it's going to cost more to build over there. But it's going to be more difficult to get it permitted. But if I go down the road, if I'm Verizon, I have 100% capacity on your property. I go down there, I only have 90% capacity for my network because it's less suitable for my antennas. That's what they don't want you to know. So a comparable in a new lease is different from a comparable in an existing lease. On an existing lease, it's basically this. You look at what is, from a cell tower company, what they're bringing in, how much rent they're bringing in from the actual carriers, et cetera, what they're generating there. Secondly, what is the value of that site to each carrier? Again, you go back into the network needs. If they had to move, what the cost would be, what the operational impact would be. Third is, if they had to relocate the tower, if they come to you and they pound their chest and they say, if you don't do this, we're going to move down the road. Hold on. What's the cost? And what is going to be the benefit for you to stay? And what is also going to be the detriment if you have to leave financially and operationally? So you start looking at those data points, and then you start getting deeper with regards to what actual equipment's up there, what's the restrictions on moving a site, et cetera, et cetera. And then you start narrowing it down. The easiest thing I can say, and the way I can say it, I guess, is you just look at, and you're basically, all we're doing is, if we could, it'd be, we're punching a button and look at what they're looking at, basically on their screen. And they're not going to tell you that. And they hate to move sites because it has a triggering impact. It has a triggering impact from a capacity needs and operational needs. And I'll tell you this. I've never seen a situation by which somebody inside of a tower company or wireless carrier loves to go inside and say to their boss, hey, we need to move a site.
Yeah,
we need to do this.
I could imagine.
They don't want to do it because of all the operational and soft cost impact, but also the capital. They have to come out of somebody's pocket that day to move a site down the road. And guess what? If they go down the road, they still got to pay rent down the road. So again, we're just looking at what they're looking at from our perspective. And then we start comparing this against other situations that they've had the similar situation with regards to how many years left on the lease, what kind of tower out there, what equipment. And then we see what they've negotiated on those deals. And guess what? We're just using those deals against them. Just like a cell tower company comes out to a property owner and says, hey, we've got this guy 2 miles away to agree to this, right? And they're trying to use that as an example. We're just using, hey, there's a tower exactly like this, maybe 1,000 miles away, and you agree to this. Mm-hmm. So we're just using their information. Look, I am a copycat. Okay, I like things that are proven. I just like to take it and make it better from my side of the table.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more, man. And is that something that you guys do as far as you do for clients, go through and do that analysis of valuing the cell tower itself and saying, hey, these are the carriers, like let's say it's on an existing tower, these are the carriers that are on there, this is the value of those. It would, these areas in this part of town are permitted and not permitted. That analysis that you walked through, is that something that you guys do, or is there a way that people can do this on their own?
Well, there's not really a way people can do it on their own because they're not privy to the information. But I'll go back to the cell tower AI, and really it has ignited how efficient and how fast we can do it. Because what we can do is I'll say it's kind of like if you're going to go buy a car, you have that Carfax, right? So now we have the ability to put your situation and almost do what we're calling a cell fax, and basically pull out all these data points and say all these different situations exist. And it's a very efficient way to look at valuation and other red flag areas and things of that. And then go to the next layer of alternatives to that, suggestions to that, et cetera. So we're trying to make this more efficient through the ability to take a huge database, our expertise, put those together, get that information out so the property owner has that. Again, going back to, hey, here's this information to show what you are offering them, not what they are offering you.
Yeah, I love that. So Hugh, when you're talking about like bad leases, so someone just bought a facility and it has a bad cell tower lease, like what is that process like to re-engage with the cell tower? Like, is there a timeline of like, because these contracts are decades long, right? And so if someone signs it, is it like you can't start renegotiating for 5 years, or could the cell tower just say like, too bad, we like our deal, we don't want to renegotiate no matter what? Like, what does that like to engage with them?
Well, the first thing I would tell you, if you're going to buy a facility that has a cell tower, contact us. We'll look at it before you buy it, number one,
Yes.
because that's the
Good
first
point.
step. You get to it before you get it. But here's the thing: we're talking about those bad things that exist in a cell tower lease, and over time become worse. I always try to look at a little silver lining. That long-term nature could be a bad situation, but it also could be a bad situation for the cell tower company. I mean, this is they can't cover. I can't, I drafted leases for AT&T for a very long time, and I can predict everything that's going to happen over 20, 30 years. So there's always going to be a situation. So my point being is this: if you have a lease that you feel like is a bad lease, what you have to start to do, and what we do for our clients, is start to look at those things that are shortfalls for the tower company, things they need. So to re-engage, because they're always needing something. There's always those different things, like I said, space, time, all these different things. And I'll also say this: there are a huge amount out there of cell tower agreements that the cell tower company and the wireless carriers are, let's say, not in compliance exactly. And you go back and if you're able to know what you're looking for, you're able to see those things, and boom, the door cracks open. You can get back in the game. But here's the thing: when you get back in the game, get as much through that door as possible. Don't just say, hey, I want, a little more rent, because that sometimes is the least of your concerns. You want to get that financial benefit, but you also want to make sure you address those things that can have a negative impact on your property, your facility, et cetera.
Man, that's gold.
Yeah, because I look at this as a niche within a niche. Like we have people who are specifically looking for storage facilities with cell towers on them, and it almost makes me think that there's a value add aspect of looking at storage properties that have not the best cell tower lease agreements that you can go in and renegotiate to get value add through that lease. And so like what you're saying, Hugh, too, is like, never mind with AI how much more efficient you can do it, but if you can find those opportunities where it's like, hey, these cell towers, like, they're not in compliance, or there's things that they would definitely be open to renegotiating there. That's the rental aspect, but then the structure that you're saying, but just on the revenue side, that's so much more that you can value add to your bottom line on your storage facility by increasing the cash flow if you can find those in the weeds contracts out there.
Well, the biggest thing I can say very quickly, if you're searching for self storage facilities, and more particularly, and they have cell towers on them, the quick way, and there's a lot more to this, but you're looking at three components, and the first is who's on the cell tower, who's out there, who's the lease is with. Okay, number one, and if it's with a tower company versus a wireless carrier, you probably have more opportunity to renegotiate sooner than you might. Okay, that's number one. Second is how much space is actually being given up. The smaller amount of space, the better for you. So if they're only taking, let's say, 2,500 square feet versus 10,000, boom, you have some, because there always need for additional space. Because when they put equipment on the tower, they need equipment on the ground. Okay, that's it. I'd look for that. The third is time. When you get under 10 years under a lease, it becomes crucial for a tower company to start to extend that out. From a lot of different perspectives, it get very complicated, but that is a really starting point of you being able to, if not right then, in the near term, be able to renegotiate to sell that time. What I mean by that is renegotiate, get a better term based upon that time. So who it is, space, and how much time. If you said, hey, I have a lease, is this a good opportunity? That's the first three things I would look at.
No, that's perfect. And it's a perfect segue, because I had this is funny, it's one of the comments or questions that we got in our self-storage income community. And this is touching on almost this thing exactly. But the question was, I'm looking at a facility for sale that currently has a cell tower on it and is paying rent to the storage facility owner. Apparently, this lease will disappear in 2027, but the cell tower will remain on the property and remain functioning. Seems as though the seller is trying to include the value of the lease. So it's trying to just include the overall value of the cell tower lease in it. And they're just curious if anybody else has seen anything like this. It sounds like a lease is expiring. What does that whole process look like? I'm looking at a facility, lease is expiring in 2027. Do they ever leave a cell tower and abandon it, or?
Well, we've had this situation occur with actually a self-storage facility, I believe in Arkansas, years ago. So I'll use that example. Is that if you have a facility that you're buying and there's a lease that's expiring, or they contact you and say, we're terminating this, okay, just whatever. Usually under that agreement, they have to take down the tower, remove it, restore it, et cetera. Okay, that's usually the case. Now, if they're going to go, if there's only 2 years left and they need to renegotiate, boom, great opportunity. You need to take advantage of it. And when I say great opportunity, you need to take advantage of all of it, not just the rent, the whole structure.
Yep.
Okay, that's number one. But if they're going to go, then you have the option to go to them and say, look, you can leave the cell tower and just pay me a certain amount to leave it out there. Okay. Come up with an amount. We can help you out with that, trying to figure out based upon what it is, what their cost may be, and say, hey, it may be $100,000 for them to remove it. Offer them to buy you out to pay you $75,000, and you keep it. Okay. Then you hold the cell tower, and this happened years ago. And we've done this a few times. Is then somebody comes to you, let's say AT&T, Verizon, whoever comes to you, and then wants to go on the tower. Now you're a tower owner, and you own the tower, and you're leasing direct. Now it depends upon the situation, but that's an option. If you're going to have to keep the tower, if you're going to have to keep it, definitely do that. If they're going to have to remove it, then you can always think about renegotiating and saying, basically pay me to leave it there without having to take on the cost. And then you can, hopefully somebody will need to use it down the road. And worst case scenario, you may have it out there. And if you ever have to redevelop property, you take it down and you've gotten some money for the cost of taking it down. But that's happened. And I promise you, the one over in Arkansas has benefited greatly because they've not only added, I believe, first tenant, they put on a second tenant. And they're a tower company now. They're a tower company inside their cell tower. and it's awesome. A good deal. It's a good deal for them. It kind of worked out. And we've had others that happen that way as well. But that's the one that pops in my head.
Too cool. I love it. Yeah, that question came up and I was like, dang, that's actually a really good one. I hadn't thought about what happens when the lease ends.
Yeah. The only caveat there, we've dealt with some of the larger self-storage companies, and they've had some towers on their property they actually own. You just have to be very careful of what, how you operate those and how you manage them. But it's, again, if you have somebody that knows what they're doing, they can figure it out, and they can be really advantageous, very valuable.
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense. And talking to some of those things, can cell towers hold property owners in default of anything? Can they come after you and say, hey, you're not holding your end of the bargain? Or, I mean, what are some of those common things, if there are any?
Yeah, the biggest thing here is that you have to be very careful on the language with regards to default and breaches of a lease, because usually it's upside down. Usually what I mean by that is the tower companies can get away with things and keep on not having to cure the default, and they can just run on and run on. And the other advantage they have is they're very big. So what are you going to do? You're going to go fight, AT&T in court over this? If they don't send you a payment for 3 months or are blocking some of your property, you see where I'm going. Yeah. From a property owner's perspective, you have to be very careful. The biggest one that we see a lot of times is they throw in this, and it's really ridiculous because the nature of how the tower companies do this all the time on access. So they say, look, if you're in default, if we can't get access to our cell tower, and where that comes into play, they start throwing a $500 a day fine on you, and it's contractually obligated. So you have to be very careful with access rights, things of that nature, because that could even be, a self-storage facility. People are out there blocking the way to get to a tower because it's on the way to your facility, things of that nature. The big advantage, like I said, the tower companies have a lot of resources, and you don't want to get that letter from a wireless carrier saying, hey, we're taking you to court. And then because usually, you can eat through the rent you're getting really quickly because most of these leases aren't generating as much as they should. And that really puts you on on your back foot on negotiating. But access, compliance with regards to just general permitting, things like that. But those are the two biggest things that we see.
I was listening to the podcast earlier than the one you were just on with us last year, Hugh, and it was AJ saying that the key code was wrong for the cell tower, and they sent a letter saying like, "Hey, we can't get in here, we can't access." So it sounds like access is the biggest thing for them, that they're like, if you don't give us access, we're gonna cause problems.
Well, kind of a flip of that really quickly. I'll give one point to a property owner. I always say you can always flip these situations the other way. I would tell you that my philosophy on these situations is, if somebody's trying to access your property or do work on your property, look, they have to show their right to be on your property. You don't have to defend them not having a right to be out there. So if they want access, hey, show me the agreement. Secondly, what are you doing? Show me the right to do that. Think of this as always, they have to show their ticket to get in the game, but they also have to show their ticket to go to their seat. Okay. So what property owners get the kind of, again, it's almost like psychology, is their own defensive. Oh, I got to prove they don't have something. No, they are the tenant. I couldn't lease a self storage unit and say, hey, prove that I don't have a right to do this and prove I don't have a right to do that. No, you say, here's the contract you sign, and you can't do this and you can't do that, and you have to show me this, and et cetera. So don't look at it. It's just a psychology that the cell tower companies promote, and they get people to kind of agree to it.
Seems kind of like a common thing. The nasty gram from the legal department or the attorneys comes through, and it's like all emotional. That's like the first reaction. It's like, oh my gosh, like they put in the little things like conduct yourself accordingly and all the things to make people all scared.
Yeah, it's and formerly being one of those attorneys, I would say thank you. I did my job. But that's it's look, again, you have a lot of options. If you get one of those letters, you have some options there, and understand it's, again, I always go back. It's your property. You work really hard to buy it and run it, and they're just a tenant.
No, that's a great way to look at it.
I got one more question that comes to mind for me is people who own a property are looking to add a cell tower to their property. And I know really the ultimate answer is work with an expert, but is there any like rules of thumb for like, how much space do I need to put in a cell tower? Like, is there too small of a market to even have a cell tower? Like, what are easements to have enough space between? Is there anything for people to just, kind of look at their property and be like, would this even be worth taking the next step?
Well, with regards to space and things like that, it varies greatly. We've had self-storage facilities that have, the total compound size is 500 to 1,000 square feet. It's a very small footprint. And that was great because guess what? They got to renegotiate and add to it down the road. That was great for them to add that space. Big thing there is, I kind of mentioned it, self-storage facilities for the most part in those kind of areas where you can get something built because the permitting is pretty easy on that. So they lend themselves to a higher capacity than most other commercial properties. With regards to seeing if your property is suitable, there's a couple different ways. You can have a property in a very rural area, comparative to Atlanta, Nashville, wherever, and it could be a better cell site than one in the middle of downtown Nashville, where I am. And so it really depends upon, again, that one single site. The best way to do it, and what we kind of did, I'll say two things. We try to get people contact us. We get 1,000 to 2,000 inquiries every month about we have a great property. And we tell people that the best way, we can't contact AT&T as they have a great location for you. We try to at least get those properties out to the people that make the decisions. So if they are looking, then they can connect with those people. That's a kind of a speed to market. So they have to find out who owns it, who to contact. Those are very big hurdles that they have to get through. And if that's right in front of them, that's great. The other thing is, one of the things we're working on, and we'll probably hopefully get this done by the end of the year, with AI, we're not only be able to take the leases, we're able to take sites all across the country, and we're able to look at variables and see where the next sites need to be built. And so you start to limit that down. So we can take all these, we have almost 300 cell site information. So we can look at everything and start to put data points and really kind of narrow it down to where, is this a red zone, yellow zone, orange zone, blue zone, kind of, a decreasing possibility with property owners. So if you have a portfolio of, let's say, 10 properties, 100 properties, 5 properties, whatever, we can put those in and start categorizing those with regards to probabilities of they at some point possibly being a suitable site for a cell tower.
Could you take the next step then and say, like, here's what we think we could get your rent to be, so that way they can use that in their underwriting and pro forma? Because that's cool what you're saying, to be able to take your properties and be like, here's what we think we could get. And then the next step is like, here's how we think we could impact your bottom line too.
Yes. So all we're doing is hopefully by the end of the year, we'll be able to combine what we already do with taking that rent and structure and things that we already can do, is combine that with a possible site and already have that built in. So we have a range of where we need to be with regards to rent and other terms. And it's based upon the level of that site with regards to need and upside as well. So yeah, it really, that's where, again, I go back to the cell tower AI that we built and are building. I can't tell you, it's just like every couple of days we're adding on this. We think, hey, now we can do this, now we can do this. That's where all this becomes a situation by which for years we had all this data. We were collecting data, we had this, and we had it, but it was, it wasn't easily accessible and usable. Now it's just, we can pop it in and start doing all this with us. And it really significantly separates us from anybody else out there, because we have more, I would say we have better data than the cell tower companies have, because the cell tower companies look at only their data. I look at it from a perspective like a football game. They're sitting on the sideline. They see what's going on the field. They have a low perspective. We've been sitting up in the stands at the 50-yard line. We see everything that goes on all across the country, all the different companies, all the different situations. And we are able to take all that and mix it together, where all those companies are just looking at their little silos of what they have.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely incredible, man. What you guys are building with Cell Tower AI and just the capability, like you said, it's like you realize something new every other day. You're like, oh, well, like that's a possibility, and that's a possibility. Like, it's just opened the door for so much value in so many ways. So it's cool to see that you guys are capitalizing on that. So let's say people have more questions. They have something more specific related to their property or a potential deal they're looking at. I know you've got a couple companies. What are those companies, and how do they get in contact with you guys?
So vertical consultants, you can reach out to us via our website. That's the easiest way. And that's celltowerleaseexperts.com, or also go visit celltowerai.com. And that's strictly our Cell Tower AI model. And I always say now we're vertical consultants powered by Cell Tower AI. I used to think it was me. I thought I was powering this. Now I'm going to be put out of business. The computer is going to take my job here eventually. I think that probably, for some of the people that work with me, they'll probably like that. If I have to be pushed out and they just have to push a couple of buttons, don't have to deal with me. And I'm sure the tower companies would like it better too, but that's another story.
Yeah, well, dude, I always hear the gurus talking about firing yourself. So you're doing a great job.
Well, I think there may be a mutiny after today, but that's another story. But that's okay.
Oh, man. Well, cool, Hugh. Thanks so much for your time, man, and running through this stuff. It's so valuable for our listeners and for people in our community to just go through and really be able to see and peek behind the veil, because this is something that you wouldn't normally be exposed to have this just insider, again, behind the veil look at cell towers and how these things operate. It's kind of like having that, like you got this double agent, you got a spy in the background that can go in and get all the intel for you, and you can make some, really good decisions. So appreciate you being here. Thanks so much. And we'll put all those links in the show notes. Anybody that you want to go check those out, just go to the show notes, click those links, head over there, talk to Hugh and his team. Great people over there. And as always, thanks everybody for listening. Hugh, thanks again for your time. And George, it's good to see you, man. Thanks for being here.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Hugh.
Thank you.